March 14th, 2024. Daniel Cooper was sitting on his front porch at 6:47 in the morning, drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at foreclosure papers he'd read so many times he had them memorized. 63 years old, farmed the same 240 acres in southern Illinois his entire life, and in exactly 17 days, the bank was taking it all. The coffee tasted like ash in his mouth. Then he heard the trucks. Not one truck, not two. The sound of diesel engines, dozens of them rumbling up his gravel driveway like a mechanical army. Daniel stood up slowly, his arthritic knees protesting, and walked to the edge of the porch. What he saw made him think he was having a stroke. Semi-trucks, flatbed after flatbed after flatbed, stretching down his driveway and out onto the county road as far as he could see, each one carrying brand new John Deere tractors, still wrapped in protective covering, gleaming green and yellow in the early morning sun. Daniel counted, stopped counting, started again. His hands started shaking. The lead truck pulled up to his barn, and a man in his 40s climbed out, carrying a clipboard and wearing a Heartland Transport Company jacket. "Mr. Daniel Cooper?" the man called out. Daniel couldn't speak, just nodded. "Sir, I've got a delivery for you. 100 John Deere 6155R tractors. Where would you like us to unload them?" The world tilted sideways. Daniel had to grab the porch railing to stay standing. "There's been a mistake," Daniel managed to say, his voice hoarse. "I didn't order any tractors. I can't afford. I don't have money for—" The driver consulted his clipboard. "No mistake, sir. Order was placed 3 weeks ago. Fully paid in advance. Cash. All 100 units. We're just here to deliver and get your signature confirming receipt." "Paid by who?" The driver shrugged. "Don't have that information. My paperwork just says delivery to Daniel Cooper, this address. Payment confirmed. That's all I know." Daniel felt like he was dreaming, or dying, or both. "How much—" He couldn't even finish the question. "Sir, I don't know the purchase details. I just deliver. But if I had to guess, 100 brand new 6155Rs, you're looking at somewhere north of $12 million. $12 million. Daniel's entire farm, all 240 acres, the house, the barn, every piece of equipment he owned, was worth maybe $800,000 on a good day. Someone had just given him $12 million in tractors. "There's an envelope," the driver said, pulling a sealed manila envelope from his clipboard. "Came with the delivery instructions. Says to give it to you personally." Daniel took the envelope with trembling hands. His name was written on the front in handwriting he didn't recognize. "So where do you want these, sir? We've got 99 more trucks behind me, and we're blocking the county road." Daniel looked at his property. His small barn, his modest equipment shed, his 240 acres that were about to belong to the bank. I don't understand what's happening." The driver's expression softened. "Sir, I've been doing deliveries for 23 years. Never seen anything like this. Somebody out there thinks an awful lot of you. Now, where can we put these tractors?" Daniel's mind was blank, empty, overwhelmed. The south field. It's empty. 40 acres. You can line them up there." The driver nodded, spoke into a radio, and within minutes the semi-trucks were moving in coordinated precision, backing into Daniel's south field, unloading tractor after tractor after tractor. Brand new, perfect, more equipment than Daniel had seen in his entire life. He sat down on his porch steps, still holding the envelope, and watched the impossible unfold in front of him. His neighbor, Harold Mitchell, came driving up the road in his pickup truck, slowed to a crawl, stared at the line of semi-trucks, then parked and walked over. "Daniel, what in God's name is going on?" "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. "Someone sent me 100 tractors." "Someone sent you—" Harold stopped, started again. "Who?" "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" I don't know. They just started arriving. Harold stared at the field filling up with green and yellow iron. Daniel, that's millions of dollars. 12 million, the driver said. Harold sat down on the steps next to Daniel. Both men just watched in silence as the delivery continued, tractor after tractor after tractor. By 9:30 a.m., all 100 tractors were lined up in Daniel's south field in perfect rows. The delivery crews got signatures, handed Daniel a stack of paperwork, and left. And Daniel was alone with 100 John Deere tractors he hadn't ordered and couldn't have afforded in 10 lifetimes. He looked down at the envelope still clutched in his shaking hands, opened it slowly.
Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. Daniel, you saved my life 42 years ago when I had nothing. You gave me a job, a place to sleep, and a chance when everyone else turned me away. You told me kindness matters more than money. You were right. These tractors are paid for. They're yours. No strings, no payback required. You don't remember me, but I never forgot you. Thank you for teaching me what it means to be a good man. The note wasn't signed. Daniel read it 3 times. Then he started crying, deep, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere he didn't know still existed. 42 years ago, someone he'd helped, someone who'd become successful enough to give away $12 million in tractors, someone he didn't even remember. Daniel looked up at the field of tractors gleaming in the morning sun. Who were you? He thought. Who did I help that I don't even remember? And why would you do this for me? The foreclosure papers sat on the porch beside him, suddenly meaningless. Everything had just changed. Daniel just had no idea how or why or who had changed it. But he was going to find out. Daniel sat on those porch steps for another hour, the note clutched in his hand, his mind spinning through 42 years of memories trying to identify who he could have helped that profoundly. And the harder he tried to remember, the more frustrating it became, because the truth was he'd helped a lot of people over the years. It was just who he was, how he'd been raised. His father had taught him that you help people who need help and you don't keep score. His wife Martha came home from her shift at the diner in town at 10:15, saw the field full of tractors, slammed on her brakes so hard the car fishtailed in the gravel, and ran to the porch where Daniel was still sitting. Daniel, what? Whose tractors? What is happening? He handed her the note without speaking, watched her face cycle through the same emotions he'd experienced: confusion, shock, disbelief, then tears. Someone gave you $12 million in tractors? She whispered. Someone I helped 42 years ago, someone I don't even remember. Martha sat down beside him, reading the note again. 1982. That would be 1982. You were 21. We'd just gotten married that year. Daniel nodded. I was working for my father then, helping him farm, trying to save money to buy our own place. They sat in silence, both of them searching memories from over 4 decades ago. Finally, Daniel stood up, joints protesting. I need to call the bank. Martha looked at him sharply. The foreclosure? If I can sell even 10 of these tractors, I can pay off the entire farm debt and have money left over. The foreclosure doesn't matter anymore. He called Thomas Werner, the banker who'd been handling his case, the same man who'd sat across from Daniel 3 months ago, and explained with bureaucratic sympathy that the bank had no choice but to proceed with foreclosure. Mr. Werner, this is Daniel Cooper. I need to discuss my foreclosure. Werner's voice was professionally sympathetic. Mr. Cooper, I understand this is difficult, but as I explained, the foreclosure date is set for March 31st. We can't, Daniel interrupted. I want to pay off the entire debt. Silence on the line. Mr. Cooper, your total debt, including fees and interest, is $237,000. Do you have access to those funds? Daniel looked out at the field of tractors. I will have them within the week. I need you to stop the foreclosure proceedings immediately. More silence. Sir, if you can provide proof of funds, we can certainly halt the process, but I need to be clear that we've heard promises before. Daniel's voice hardened. Mr. Werner, I have $12 million in John Deere tractors sitting in my south field right now. I think I can manage to come up with $237,000. He could hear Werner's confusion through the phone. I'm sorry, did you say $12 million in tractors?
Come see for yourself if you don't believe me. They're all sitting here. 100 brand new 6155Rs delivered this morning." Werner agreed to come out that afternoon, and when his BMW pulled up at 2 p.m. and he saw the field of tractors, his professional composure cracked. "Mr. Cooper, I don't understand. Where did these come from?" Daniel showed him the note. Werner read it twice, looked at the tractors, then at Daniel. "Someone anonymously gave you this equipment?" "Apparently." Werner walked along the rows of tractors, touching them like he couldn't quite believe they were real. "Sir, each of these is worth approximately $120,000. This is an extraordinary gift." Daniel felt the weight of it settling on him. "I just wish I knew who to thank." Over the next 3 days, Daniel began his investigation in earnest, pulling out old photo albums, calling people he'd known in 1982, trying to reconstruct that year of his life and identify who he might have helped. Martha helped him make lists. People who'd worked for his father's farm, neighbors who'd been in trouble, kids from town who'd needed jobs. The list grew to 23 names, but none of them felt right. None of them triggered the memory of someone he'd saved or given a life-changing opportunity to. He called his sister Karen, who was 5 years older and might remember. 1982? Danny, that was the year Dad's farm was struggling. You were helping him just to keep things afloat. I don't remember you hiring anyone. He called his old friend Mike Patterson, who'd worked alongside him that summer. "Man, that was 42 years ago. My memory's not that good, but I don't remember your dad bringing on any extra help that year." Daniel even drove into town to the library, looked up old newspaper archives from 1982, searching for anything that might trigger a memory, help-wanted ads, local news, anything. Nothing. The mystery deepened, because whoever had sent these tractors clearly remembered Daniel vividly, remembered him well enough to track him down 4 decades later, remembered him with enough gratitude to give away $12 million. But Daniel couldn't for the life of him remember who it was. On the 4th day, a different delivery arrived, a single envelope delivered by certified mail, return address showing a law office in Chicago, Morrison, Chen & Associates. Inside was a letter on expensive letterhead explaining that the tractors had been purchased through a trust, that the trust's benefactor wished to remain anonymous, and that if Daniel chose to sell any of the equipment, the proceeds were his to keep, with no obligations or restrictions. The letter was signed by an attorney named Richard Morrison, and it included a phone number. Daniel called immediately. "Mr. Morrison, this is Daniel Cooper. I received your letter about the tractors. I need to know who sent them." Morrison's voice was professional, careful.
"Mr. Cooper, I'm bound by attorney-client privilege. My client has specifically requested anonymity." Daniel's frustration boiled over. "Someone gave me $12 million and I don't even know who to thank. You can't expect me to just accept that." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Cooper, I can tell you this much. My client's instructions were very specific. They said you wouldn't remember them, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that you changed their life when they needed it most, and they wanted to return that kindness." The answer didn't satisfy Daniel at all. It only made him more desperate to know, and he hung up feeling more lost than before. July 1982. Daniel Cooper was 21 years old, newly married to Martha for exactly 4 months, working on his father's struggling farm just outside of Carterville, Illinois, and trying to save enough money to eventually buy land of his own, which at the rate he was going would take approximately 40 years. The summer of '82 was brutal. Temperatures over 95 degrees for weeks straight, drought conditions that had his father's corn crop wilting in the fields, and the farm economy in southern Illinois was in shambles, with grain prices so low that most farmers were losing money on every bushel they sold. Daniel's father, Robert Cooper, ran 320 acres and employed exactly one person besides Daniel, himself, because he couldn't afford anyone else. They were barely making it, surviving on prayers and stubbornness, and Robert had told Daniel just last week that if the fall harvest didn't come in strong, they might have to sell equipment just to pay property taxes. On a Thursday afternoon in mid-July, Daniel was in the machine shed rebuilding a carburetor on their oldest tractor when he heard someone calling from the driveway. He walked out into the blazing sun and saw a kid, couldn't have been more than 17 or 18, standing next to a backpack that looked like it had been dragged through hell, wearing jeans with holes in the knees and a t-shirt that was more stained than fabric, his face sunburned and dirty, his hair shaggy and uncombed. "Help you?" Daniel called out, wiping grease from his hands. The kid looked nervous, desperate.
"Sir, I'm looking for work, any kind of work. I can do anything. I'm strong and I learn fast and I'll work for whatever you can pay." Daniel's instinct was to say no. They couldn't afford to hire anyone, barely could afford to pay themselves. But something about the kid's face stopped him, something in his eyes that Daniel recognized because he'd seen it in the mirror often enough. Desperation mixed with determination, the look of someone who needed this, not just wanted it. "Where are you from?" Daniel asked. "Iowa, sir, but I've been traveling, looking for work. Just need enough to eat and maybe a place to sleep. I'm not picky." Daniel noticed the kid was swaying slightly, probably hadn't eaten in a while. "When's the last time you had a meal?" The kid's face flushed. "Yesterday morning, sir." Daniel made a decision he couldn't really afford to make. "Come on up to the house. My wife's got lunch ready. We'll get you fed, and then we can talk." The kid's eyes got bright, and for a second Daniel thought he might pry. "Really? I mean, yes, sir. Thank you, sir." His name was Marcus Webb, and over lunch, Martha had made sandwiches and soup, and Marcus ate like he was starving, which he probably was. The story came out in pieces. He was 18, had been kicked out of his home in Des Moines 6 weeks ago by a stepfather who didn't want him around, had been hiking south looking for farm work, sleeping in barns or under bridges, taking odd jobs when he could find them, but mostly just surviving day to day. "I can work," Marcus said, his voice urgent. "I grew up around farms. I know equipment. I can drive tractors. I can do field work. Whatever you need, I'll do it, and I won't complain." Daniel looked at Martha, who was watching Marcus with the same compassion Daniel felt. They couldn't afford to hire help, but they also couldn't send this kid back out to starve on the road. "I can't pay much," Daniel said slowly. $40 a week, and you can sleep in the bunkhouse out back of the barn. It's not fancy, but it's got a bed and it's cool at night. We'll feed you 3 meals a day." Marcus's face transformed. $40 a week in room and board? "Sir, that's more than fair. That's generous. I'll work so hard you won't regret this." Daniel extended his hand. "We start at 6 tomorrow morning." Marcus shook his hand with a grip that was too tight, too eager, the grip of someone who'd just been thrown a lifeline. That summer, Marcus worked harder than anyone Daniel had ever seen. Up before dawn, working until dark, never complaining even when the heat was unbearable. Learning equipment maintenance, helping with the failing crops, doing whatever Daniel or his father needed. He was smart, picked things up quickly, and there was a hunger in him, not just for food but for knowledge, for belonging, for proving he was worth something. In August, when the harvest came in worse than expected, and Daniel's father called him aside to say they couldn't afford to keep Marcus on anymore, Daniel made another decision he couldn't afford. He took a pay cut himself, went from the $60 a week his father was paying him down to $40, and told his father to keep Marcus through the fall. "That kid's got nowhere to go," Daniel told his father. "We send him away, he's back on the street. Maybe he doesn't make it." Robert had looked at his son with something like pride. "You're a better man than me, Danny." Marcus stayed through October, and when he finally left, said he had a lead on a factory job in St. Louis that paid real money. He shook Daniel's hand with tears in his eyes. "You saved my life, Mr. Cooper. I mean that literally. If you hadn't taken me in, I don't know if I'd have survived the summer. I'll never forget what you did for me. Never." Daniel had brushed it off. "You worked hard. You earned every penny." "It wasn't about the money," Marcus said. "It was about you treating me like I mattered, like I was worth something. Nobody else did that." And then Marcus Webb had walked down the driveway with his backpack, hitchhiked to St. Louis, and Daniel had never seen or heard from him again. Had honestly mostly forgotten about him in the 42 years that followed. Just another summer worker in a lifetime of farming. Nothing special, nothing memorable. Except to Marcus, it had been everything. The memory came back to Daniel on the 6th day after the tractors arrived, hitting him like a physical blow while he was sitting at the kitchen table going through old journals Martha had kept from their early years of marriage. And there it was in her neat handwriting, dated August 3rd, 1982. "Danny brought home a stray today. Kid named Marcus from Iowa, 18 and homeless. Danny gave him a job even though we can barely afford to pay ourselves. I love my husband's heart even when it scares me financially." Daniel stared at the entry, and suddenly he could see Marcus's face clearly. Skinny kid with desperate eyes, sunburned and half-starved, standing in their driveway asking for work. "Martha?" Daniel called out, his voice shaking. "Marcus Webb. Do you remember him?" Martha came in from the living room, saw Daniel's face, sat down quickly. "The kid from Iowa? The summer of '82? He stayed in the bunkhouse, worked for us about 3 months?" The memories were flooding back now. Marcus learning to rebuild carburetors, Marcus helping with the harvest, Marcus sitting at their dinner table eating like every meal might be his last, Marcus's face when he'd left in October saying Daniel had saved his life. "What if it's him?" Daniel said. "What if Marcus Webb is the one who sent the tractors?" Martha pulled the anonymous note from where they'd been keeping it safe in a drawer, read it again. "You saved my life 42 years ago when I had nothing. You gave me a job, a place to sleep, and a chance when everyone else turned me away." Danny, that's exactly Marcus's story. Daniel grabbed his laptop with shaking hands and started searching. Marcus Webb, St. Louis, then Marcus Webb, Iowa, then just Marcus Webb, and the search results exploded across his screen. The first result made Daniel's breath catch. Marcus Webb, CEO of Webb Technologies, valued at $4.2 billion following successful IPO.
Daniel clicked the link and a Wikipedia page loaded, complete with a professional photo of a man in his 60s wearing an expensive suit, silver hair, confident smile, and Daniel stared at that face trying to see the skinny 18-year-old kid from 42 years ago. The biography was stunning. Marcus Webb, born 1964 in Des Moines, Iowa, founded Webb Technologies in 1991 after working his way through community college and then Northwestern University. Built the company from a one-room operation into a software giant specializing in agricultural technology and farm management systems. Went public in 2019, currently worth an estimated $4.2 billion. Known for philanthropy focused on helping at-risk youth and supporting small farmers. Daniel read it twice, his hands trembling. "Martha, look at this." She read over his shoulder, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. "Oh my God, Danny, that's him. That has to be him." Daniel found a contact form on the Webb Technologies website, started typing an email, then stopped because what do you say to someone who just gave you $12 million? He tried the law office in Chicago instead, called Richard Morrison. "Mr. Morrison, this is Daniel Cooper again. I think I know who your client is. I think it's Marcus Webb." There was a long pause. "Mr. Cooper, I can neither confirm nor deny." "Please," Daniel interrupted. "I remember him now. I remember Marcus. He was just a kid, 18 years old. I gave him a job for one summer. I didn't think it was anything special. I just helped someone who needed help. But if that's him, if Marcus is the one who did this, I need to thank him. I need to tell him." His voice broke. Morrison's professional tone softened slightly. "Mr. Cooper, if, hypothetically, my client were the person you're describing, what would you want to say to them?" Daniel wiped his eyes. "I'd want to say that he didn't have to do this, that he didn't owe me anything, that I was just doing what anyone should do, but that I'm grateful beyond words, and that I'm proud of who he became." Morrison was quiet. "Mr. Cooper, I'll pass that message along to my client, but I need you to understand something. My client doesn't want recognition, doesn't want publicity, doesn't want anything except to know that they helped you the way you once helped them." Daniel's voice was thick. "Can you at least tell me if I'm right, if it's Marcus?" Another pause. "I'll tell you this much. My client said you wouldn't remember them at first, but that when you did, you'd understand why this mattered so much. Does that answer your question?" It did. 2 days later, a package arrived by courier. No return address, just Daniel's name. Inside was a framed photograph that Daniel hadn't seen in 42 years. A Polaroid from August 1982 showing Daniel and Marcus standing next to the old tractor in the machine shed, both of them covered in grease, Daniel's arm around Marcus's shoulders, both of them smiling. On the back, in handwriting Daniel now recognized from the anonymous note, were words written recently. "This was the day I stopped being nobody and started believing I could be somebody. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for treating me like I mattered when everyone else treated me like trash. You gave me more than a job. You gave me hope, and I built my entire life on the foundation of that hope. The tractors are nothing compared to what you gave me, but they're all I can think to give back. With eternal gratitude, Marcus Webb." Daniel held the photograph with shaking hands, remembering that day, remembering Marcus's eager smile, remembering how the kid had worked so hard to prove he deserved the chance Daniel had given him, and suddenly the $12 million in tractors made perfect sense, because what's money compared to a life saved? What's equipment compared to hope given to someone who had none?
Marcus Webb arrived at Daniel's farm on a Saturday morning in early April, driving himself in a modest Ford pickup truck that probably cost less than one of the tractors he'd given away, and when Daniel saw him getting out of the truck, silver-haired now but still with those same intense eyes, 42 years collapsed into nothing, and Daniel was looking at that desperate 18-year-old kid again.
They stood in the driveway for a long moment, neither one knowing quite what to say. And then Marcus's face crumpled, and he crossed the distance between them and hugged Daniel like a drowning man grabbing a lifeline. And Daniel hugged him back, both of them crying, two men in their 60s crying in a farmyard, because sometimes the weight of gratitude and time and changed lives is too much to hold inside. "I'm sorry I stayed anonymous," Marcus said when they finally pulled apart. I didn't want you to feel obligated or weird about it. I wanted you to have the tractors because you needed them, not because you felt like you had to accept them from someone you barely remembered." Daniel's voice was rough. "Marcus, $12 million? You can't just—" "Yes, I can," Marcus interrupted gently. "Danny, do you have any idea what you did for me that summer?" They sat on Daniel's porch, the same porch where Daniel had read the anonymous note 2 weeks ago, and Marcus told his story, how after leaving the Cooper farm in October 1982, he'd gotten that factory job in St. Louis, worked double shifts and saved every penny, used the money to enroll in community college, studied computer science because he'd always been good with technology, graduated top of his class, got a scholarship to Northwestern, worked his way through university doing tech support, graduated in 1989, and immediately saw an opportunity that nobody else was seeing. Farmers needed software to manage increasingly complex operations, and nobody was building it for them. "I started Webb Technologies in a studio apartment with a used computer and $5,000 in savings," Marcus said. "The first product was farm management software, basic stuff, tracking yields and expenses and equipment maintenance, but farmers loved it because it was designed by someone who actually understood farming, who'd worked in the fields, who knew what they needed." The company had grown slowly at first, then exploded in the late 90s when precision agriculture became mainstream and farmers needed integrated systems to manage GPS guidance and variable rate application and yield monitoring. By 2000, we had 60 employees. By 2010, we had 800. By 2019, when we went public, we had 4,000 employees across 12 countries. And Danny, every single step of that journey, every decision I made, every risk I took, I thought about you. Daniel shook his head. "I didn't do anything special, Marcus. I just gave you a job." Marcus's eyes were intense. "You gave me dignity when I had none. You treated me like I was worth something when I'd been told my entire life that I was worthless. My stepfather kicked me out, telling me I'd never amount to anything. I'd been sleeping under bridges and going hungry and being treated like trash by everyone I asked for help. And then you took me in. You fed me. You paid me. You taught me. You trusted me with your equipment. You introduced me to your wife like I was someone important. You made me feel human again." His voice broke. "Do you remember what you said to me the day I left?" Daniel searched his memory. "I told you that you'd worked hard and earned every penny." "No, after that, when I thanked you for saving my life, you said, 'Everyone deserves a chance, Marcus. You just needed someone to give you one.' And Danny, I carried those words with me for 42 years. I built my entire philosophy around them. Every scholarship my foundation gives, every program we fund for at-risk youth, every farmer we help who's struggling, it's all because of what you taught me that summer, that everyone deserves a chance." Marcus pulled out his phone, showed Daniel photos. "This is the Webb Foundation. We've helped 17,000 young people get education and job training. We've provided over $200 million in support to small farmers facing foreclosure. We've built community centers in 40 cities to help homeless youth. And Danny, every single person we help, I think about you. I think about how you helped me when you couldn't really afford to, and I try to do the same thing on a bigger scale." Daniel was crying again. I didn't know, Marcus. I had no idea what happened to you. You were just a kid who needed work. It didn't seem like... It seemed like nothing to you because you're a good man who helps people naturally. But to me, it was everything. It was the difference between giving up and keeping going, between believing I was worthless and believing I could be something. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out another envelope. The tractors are just the beginning. This is the rest. Inside was a certified check made out to Daniel Cooper for $2 million. Daniel stared at it, unable to process. "Marcus, I can't accept this. The tractors are already too much." "The tractors keep you farming. The money gives you freedom, Danny. You're 63. You've been struggling your whole life. You deserve to farm because you want to, not because you have to. This money is so you never have to worry about foreclosure again. So you can help other people the way you helped me. So you can pass on the kindness." Daniel looked at the check, at Marcus, at the field full of tractors, and finally understood that this wasn't about the money or the equipment. It was about a circle completing, about kindness planted 42 years ago finally bearing fruit, about a life saved growing into thousands of lives saved, and about two men, one who'd given without expecting anything back, and one who'd received and never forgotten, finding each other again after 4 decades to close a loop that had always been open. 6 months later, in October 2024, Daniel Cooper stood in front of a crowd of 200 people at the Southern Illinois Farm Bureau annual meeting, and for the first time in his life, he was telling the story publicly. How he'd been 17 days from foreclosure when 100 John Deere tractors arrived at his farm. How he'd had no idea who sent them. How he'd discovered it was a kid he'd helped 42 years ago for one summer and then mostly forgotten. How that kid had become a billionaire and never forgot the farmer who'd given him a chance when he had nothing. The room was silent except for the sound of people crying, and when Daniel finished, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. But the story didn't end with Daniel keeping the money and the tractors. That wasn't who he was, wasn't what Marcus's gift had taught him to do. Daniel had sold 60 of the 100 tractors, keeping 40 for his own use and generating $7.2 million in revenue. And combined with Marcus's $2 million check, he'd created something he called the Second Chance Farm Fund, dedicated to helping farmers facing foreclosure in Southern Illinois. In the 6 months since the fund's creation, Daniel had helped 11 families stay on their farms by paying off debts, providing equipment, or covering operating costs until they could get back on their feet. And every single family received the same note. "Someone helped me when I had nothing. Now I'm helping you. When you're able, help someone else the way I helped you." The ripple effects were already spreading. Robert Henderson had used his saved farm to give a job to a homeless veteran who needed work. The veteran had used his wages to help his sister pay medical bills. The sister had volunteered at a food bank that fed hungry families, and on the kindness multiplied. Each act of goodness spawning more goodness, all of it traceable back to a July day in 1982 when Daniel had given a hungry kid a sandwich and a job. Marcus visited Daniel's farm regularly now, the two men having formed a friendship that transcended the decades between that first summer and now. And on one of those visits, Marcus told Daniel something that explained everything. "I set up a program at Webb Foundation called the Cooper Initiative," Marcus said. "It's specifically designed to identify people who've helped others selflessly and then fallen on hard times themselves. We find them and we help them the way you helped me. Last year alone, we assisted 47 people, gave them grants or paid off debts or provided equipment, all of it anonymous unless they figure out who we are like you did." Daniel had been stunned. "You're doing this for other people too?" Marcus smiled. "Danny, you taught me that everyone deserves a chance. I'm just trying to give chances on a scale that matches the chance you gave me. I figure if I can help 50 people the way you helped me, and each of them helps 50 people, and those people help others, maybe we can change the whole system. Maybe we can create a world where people help each other instead of just competing." The story eventually made national news, a viral video of Daniel's speech at the Farm Bureau meeting, articles in agricultural magazines, a segment on CBS Sunday Morning about the billionaire who anonymously gifted tractors to the farmer who'd helped him decades ago. And suddenly, Daniel's phone was ringing constantly with interview requests, documentary proposals, book deals. He turned them all down except one, a speaking engagement at a high school in Carterville, where he told 300 teenagers about Marcus, about kindness, about how you never know when a simple act of helping someone might change their entire life and eventually come back to you in ways you can't imagine. "I didn't help Marcus expecting anything in return," Daniel told those teenagers. "I helped him because he needed help and I could help. That's it. That's the whole reason. And 42 years later, he helped me for the same reason, not because I deserved it or earned it, but because I needed help and he could help." One kid raised his hand. "Mr. Cooper, what's the lesson we're supposed to learn from this?" Daniel thought about it carefully. "The lesson is that kindness is never wasted, even when you forget about it, even when it seems like nothing, even when you don't see the results. Every act of genuine goodness goes out into the world and creates ripples you'll never see. Marcus Webb was just a hungry kid I fed and gave a job to. I didn't think it mattered, but it mattered to him. And because it mattered to him, he built a life that's now helping thousands of other people. And all of that started because I made him a sandwich and let him sleep in my bunkhouse. So the lesson is simple. Help people when you can. Be kind when you have the opportunity. Treat people like they matter, even when they can't do anything for you, because you never know what that kindness might grow into. You never know whose life you might save. You never know when that hungry kid standing in your driveway might become the person who saves you 42 years later." The 100 John Deere tractors that had arrived on that March morning weren't just equipment. They were proof that goodness returns, that kindness multiplies, that the measure of a life well lived isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away, and that sometimes the smallest acts of decency can change the entire world, one hungry kid at a time.